365 or 366 days, and welcome to the first of our two-part Q&A Ask Me Anything. Start your weekend off right on Fridays at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with our first Q&A Ask Me Anything, and keep the vibes going good on Saturday at the same time. And then Sunday is our live stream lecture where you can vote on the channel here on YouTube for what topic you would like me to discuss in this week's upcoming live stream lecture that we do every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern. So you got Fridays Q&A part 1 at 6, Saturdays Q&A part 2 at 6, and then Sundays the Q&A shifts over to the live stream lecture. I share a topic that I want to bring to you, and I'm in a celebratory mood because it has officially been a year that we have been doing these live streams. We started off with only one Q&A, Saturdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, and eventually people were asking so many great questions that we transitioned into doing 2 Saturdays and Sundays, and then eventually the topics that I thought I would need to talk about to kill dead air and all of that stuff. Eventually, there was no dead air, so I decided to add a third live stream just for you guys, where I would bring a live stream to all of you. I will be doing a live stream, special live streams for my members. So if you join the Friendly Neighborhood History channel here on YouTube and become a member, then I will gladly be doing live streams just for you guys. They'll be more personal, more intimate, sharing thoughts and opinions, ideas about different topics and stuff like that. So if you like history and social studies, as the ambulance goes by, please like and subscribe and become a Friendly Neighborhood Historian. And if you feel so led, you can join, become a member, give a donation. Anything helps, as we use all of your funds to improve the quality and quantity of what we do here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. And Solomon, so great to see you. Thank you for joining us. I see you all the time on channel, and I really appreciate all of your commentary. Anyone who likes and subscribes becomes a Friendly Neighborhood Historian, just like Solomon here is one of those. So liking and subscribing ensures that, and hopefully one of my moderators is here and can hold down the chat and put in our social media handles, where you can follow me on X, Instagram, Facebook, Patreon, or Substack. You can read my articles on Substack or check out my my Patreon for bonus content, including my exclusive series on the First Ladies, if you want to join and become a member there. So we are celebrating because we have been doing these live streams officially for a year now, and we started the 3-part thing in September, so we'll have a year anniversary of that, where Fridays and Saturdays we answer all of your questions related to history or social studies at 6 p.m. Eastern, which we're doing right now, and then Sundays is the live stream for an hour. So go vote on what live stream lecture topic you want me to discuss, and drop a topic or comment or question you have regarding history or social studies in the chat, and we will discuss it, as we will be here doing that for the next hour or so. And I'm joining you in my usual habitat, in my smoking jacket, and in my Friendly Neighborhood studio, where all of you are welcome. And anyone who likes and subscribes, again, becomes a Friendly Neighborhood Historian. I'm not the Friendly Neighborhood Historian, but you can be one by liking and subscribing and dropping a comment, topic, or question you have regarding history, social studies, geopolitics, past and present, geography, all of that good stuff. No worries, Solomon. I'm just glad that you're here learning about history. So no pressure on anyone to join or give any money or anything like that. If you want to, that's all completely voluntary for the perks and benefits of being a member, getting early access to videos, your own special videos. I do long form and short form content here. We have long form content dropping every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern. I am very excited for today's tier ranking video of the Russian Tsars, which will come out as, I'll use that as my background for shameless promotion, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as we do every Friday and Monday. We have long-form videos releasing, and I have a tier ranking of all the Russian monarchs, all the Russian emperors. So please get ready for that. That drops with a premiere at 8 p.m. today. And I have long-form videos every Monday and Friday, and short-form content every day of all different particular historical topics, including daily videos, who was born today and who passed away on this day, as well as different series that I do, like my current series on Russian history, which is directly related to my tier ranking system, for which this image is the thumbnail. So anyways, go check that out. But yeah, if you have a question or topic or comment related to history or social studies, drop it in the chat, and I will be here to answer it for the next hour or so. We are nearly 8,200 Friendly Neighborhood Historians into this, and the support and the love and the feedback and all of that stuff is more than I can ever ask for. So I really appreciate everybody and all the support they show here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. So do you have a question, a topic, something that you'd like to learn about history? Drop it in the chat and I will answer it as soon as I possibly can. Hi, John. Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. Do you have a question or topic you'd like to discuss regarding history or social studies? Again, we do this every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and then the live stream link is every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Some people just come and hang out and enjoy the vibes. You don't have to ask a question or a topic. You can just sit by and listen and enjoy what we discuss here, and the back and forth. Sometimes it can get pretty feisty in here. We've got people of all different backgrounds and perspectives sharing their opinions and commentary on various different issues. Sometimes politics, sometimes religion, sometimes culture gets dragged in, but I always try to anchor it in the, as objectively as possible, in the whole world of history. So yeah. Anyways. And the crickets are singing. Why did the HRE break into so many pieces? So the Holy Roman Empire is originally kind of founded by Charlemagne, who conquered most of France, all of France and all of Germany, and then divided it between his three sons. One of them, Louis the Pious, took over what would be the Germanic section of that, which would become the Holy Roman Empire. I think it was Louis, or was it Otto? The Holy Roman Empire was basically Germany during the Middle Ages and other areas like Bohemia, which was modern day Czech Republic. Austria was part of it to some extent. The Netherlands were part of it to some extent. And some areas that are not technically part of Germany today. But basically, the Holy Roman Emperor for a long time was an emperor with full power and could admit and executive authority, but eventually it became more of a voting system where the emperor depended on various different principalities to vote for him to become the ruler, and he was always had to be approved of and crowned by the Pope because he was a Holy Roman Emperor. And so you had various different parts of the HRE, different principalities and things like that, voting for an emperor to come to power. And so eventually, by the late Middle Ages, it was obvious that the Holy Roman Emperor held very little power and was completely dependent on both the church and the different princes and duchies and barons to give him power. And it was all based on different German areas and the rulers of those different areas, the princes, the dukes, the nobles, the barons. And so that's why the HRE broke into so many pieces. That was Solomon asking that. Hello, Harry, my wonderful moderator. Great to see you. Hope. Looking forward to doing that collab. Harry is one of several moderators we have here at the channel, and he does an excellent job talking about British history. He's an expert in British history, and he always asks great questions about that. But he and I are doing a collab. He's writing the script for one of my videos that'll be coming out soon about the fall of the British Empire, probably two videos, a rise and a fall video. So we'll see what that entails. I'm really looking forward to going over that with Harry, with Harry's help. And eventually the Holy Roman Emperor was ineffectually powerless and couldn't make, yep, exactly. Will USA attack Iran? Well, I don't know how much of an attack it will be. It went from a full-scale war that people were worried about to being kind of this, how much of a strike will it be? Now Israel's saying that it can do all of it on its own. There's this 2-week timetable that Trump has given the Iranians. So from a geopolitical perspective, with his country being worried for the last 3 decades that Iran would gain nuclear weapons, who knows how much of that is actually true based on a continual boy who cried wolf. But uranium enrichment is definitely a worry amongst amongst many people in the West for the Iranians. So in all likelihood, I would say it's like 70 to 80% yes, but it's also extremely unlikely that turns into a full-scale war with long-term intervention from the United States, just based off of what I know about U.S. policy right now. And hello, random, hilarious. We'll see. When does GTA 6 come out? I don't know. And by the way, Harvette, there actually have been 3 world wars, and we talk about it here at the channel all the time. The 7 Years' War was the first World War, then you have the Great War would be World War II, and the war with the Nazis would be World War III. So we are all wondering when will World War IV actually start. And Prussia was part of the breakaway from the HRE. Prussia was one of the states. It was called Brandenburg Prussia. Prussia was in the east. Brandenburg was part of the principalities. And eventually the Prussians absorbed all of the other principalities except Liechtenstein and a couple others into them, and Austria obviously, and created the German Empire in 1871. Were U.S. citizens who fought against France blacklisted when they got back to USA, Spanish Civil War? Some of them definitely were. Obviously, the fear of communism was prevalent in America throughout the 20th century, especially after the next war, the World War. Hey, Hars, would you mind putting the social media handles in the chat so people can see them and maybe follow me there? We got a Substack, a Patreon, Instagram, X, Facebook. The email didn't work on my end because it says it doesn't exist, even though I literally copied. I don't understand, because you did email me and then I emailed you back. So check your email for a response from my email, Harry, because we're collaborating over email to do our videos on the rise and fall of the British Empire. I'm using an expert in British history to write the script for me, and I will be doing the presentation myself and adding whatever information I can provide as well. What do you know about the Turkish War of Independence? Specifically, I think you're referring to the Young Turks, which were a militant organization they were a political organization that turned militant, that was hell-bent on reforming the Ottoman government. After the Great War came to an end, the Ottoman Empire teetered on the edge of collapse, and eventually a revolution took place where a nationalist Turkish wing eventually won and created a government run by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, which is the modern Republic of Turkey, which has ruled over that land for a century now. And he was able to get a much better, more fair treaty that gave back a lot of land taken by the Allies after the end of what I call the Second World War. So yeah, a little bit about the War of Turkish Independence. Thanks again for doing the Battle of Waterloo in your videos. Yes, I love the Battle of Waterloo. I probably should do a long-form video about it, but I do a daily history video on this past week was the 210th anniversary of that. Yeah. Go ahead, Harry. Let me know what you get. No worries. Thank you, Abu Bakar. I really appreciate that. Very nice of you. People are always talking about my lips for some reason. So anyways, if you're enjoying what we're talking about, like and subscribe if you haven't already, and become a friendly neighborhood historian. It's as easy as that. Will animals ever develop intelligence and consciousness and take revenge on humans for everything we have done to them? Who knows what AI might be able to achieve, or some of the inventions we're looking at, like Neuralink is projecting that they might be able to help people see who are blind. I mean, blindness is one of my greatest fears. It would be incredible if that was not a huge reality. AirPods basically are what are they called? Oh God, for people who are deaf. AirPods are hearing aids. And so, yeah, that's so who knows what that could do for animals, but sentience, I'm doubting it. AI is probably the bigger danger for humans for sentience than animals. Abu Bakar, do you support Iran? I support peace. I support the end of the Iranian-Israeli war. Now Israel's involved in two wars that have probably both gone on way too long, especially the first one. And the Iranians, there are many Iranians who want a regime change. Some of them want the Shah back. That system was was first upheld through subversive behavior by the United States and then dismantled by U.S. inaction. The U.S. is responsible for a lot of the problems in Iran, at least directly, and I don't think it should dip its toe into the pool. Do not ask that, because that can cause trouble. It all depends who's here. Last week we have some characters here who have some very strong and powerful opinions that I'm always happy to entertain and then happy to crush if they are incorrect. But then again, you're allowed to disagree with me, and that's what we do here at the Friendly Neighbor History Channel. We talk about history and geopolitics, past and present, from as objective a perspective as possible, and then I share whatever opinions I can come to, whatever conclusions and premises I can make based off of the history that I know. So, yes, like and subscribe if you haven't. And yes, I like the background as well. We are celebrating here two things. One, we've been doing these live streams for about a year here on YouTube. We're about to transition to doing live streams, I think either on X or Instagram. We're also going to be making a TikTok very soon. So we'll be doing live streams on other platforms as well. We'll be doing member live streams for those who become members, where we get a little more, where we can talk about other stuff and other topics and things like that and go into more detail, and I can explain because it's probably a smaller crowd. So if you become a member, that's a possible benefit you might have. But we're celebrating a year of live streams here on YouTube, and we are celebrating my next video that will be dropping in a premiere at 8 p.m. Eastern. I have long-form videos that drop on this channel every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, and I will be tier ranking the Russian czars. I'm a Russian historian by trade, although I've learned histories about all different parts of the world, such as the Iran, which we were just talking about. So please go check out that video that drops at 8 p.m. Eastern today. So yes, thank you, Outdoors. Dude, I appreciate it. The Israelis are going nuts in the U.S. with the Lord Messiah. Donald Trump supports it, and Donald Trump definitely thinks he is like Messiah, the hand of God, and he's orange. Yes, Harry, those are good ad hominems. Why did people in the 1700s think tomatoes were deadly? I don't know exactly why tomatoes were considered deadly. It might be because they were acidic, and their composition is different than that, and they were often grouped with vegetables and their fruits. So there you go. Yes, I know Pakistan quite well. Harry may not like this, but Pakistan just recommended Trump for the 2026 Nobel Peace Prize award. So maybe he's Pakistan's Messiah as much as he is the Israeli and MAGA Messiah, Harry. But yeah, Pakistan, the Muslim majority area of the Indian subcontinent where Indian civilization first began and in the Indus River Valley, was divided by the British in 1947, leading to the dispute over the Kashmir region between the Indians and Pakistanis, which almost led to a war earlier this year. I'm not sure. I could upload them. That'd be fun. The acid in tomatoes in rich people plates materials caused a reaction to occur when you ate in the tomato. It caused people to get sick and die, so many were scared. Oh, I see. So it was an allergic reaction. And see, even there's a lot of things even I don't know. So, anyways, if you have another topic you would like to talk about or something related to history or social studies, please drop it in the chat, and yeah, be happy to talk about it with you. We've got another 45 minutes or so. Maybe we can actually end at an hour, and I won't go crazy with answering all the questions with copious amounts of detail. We'll see what it looks like. Oh, Amar, great to see you. Can I learn more about the German Democratic Republic, or GDR? I'm not sure which exactly you're referring to, because when I think of German Republic, I think of Weimar. Is that East Germany or West Germany? I always get them confused. I'll just give a basic general overview. So in 1945, when the Nazis were defeated at the end of what I call World War III, the Soviets were allowed by the Allies, US and Great Britain, to arrive in Berlin first. Because of this, the sector of Berlin, as well as all the eastern segments of Germany, were absorbed into the Soviet sphere of influence and an occupied zone ran by the Soviet Union. The western part of both the city of Berlin and Germany itself, because Berlin is the capital of Germany, were divided into segments of Western occupation, the British, the French, and the Americans. They all helped, and both sides helped at the beginning of the Cold War, the rebuilding of Berlin and Germany. Eventually, it became obvious that the Soviets were not going to let these areas actually self-determine unless it was a communistic decision. This led to the Soviets refusing to allow Berlin to receive rebuilding materials and supplies from the Allies, who were trying desperately to keep as much of Europe as possible out of the communist clutches. And this led to the Berlin airlift, where the Americans sent in supplies to Berlin. But these rising tensions between both sides and both of their efforts to rebuild and reform these areas in their own political and social images led to the division of Germany into two governments. When the Allied occupation ended of Germany and of Berlin, West Germany came under the sway of a democratically influenced and elected government that lasted for about 45 years. In the East, it was under the sway of a communistic government, which is most best known for its secret police force, which helped them maintain order, known as the Stasi. Berlin remained divided despite being squarely in East Germany. In 1961, people continually trying to escape East Germany by going to West Berlin from East Berlin were cut off when the Berlin Wall was built by the Soviet Union. That's just a general overview. Eventually, in 1987, Ronald Reagan's aggressiveness against the Soviets led to him calling for the wall to be torn down. 2 years later, the wall did come down in an ordinance that was heavily misinterpreted by the German people, and Berlin was reunited, and eventually the whole country was reunited. I believe by 1991, Germany was one whole country again. So there you go. Yeah, I would agree with that, Hars. Do you know a girl leader named Olga? If you're referring, so you're thinking of Princess Olga of Kiev. She was a Russian or Ukrainian princess. It's during the Kievan Rus, which is a Russian and Ukrainian state that existed in the 9th, 10th, 11th centuries. If you want to learn more, go check out my series on Russian history. But basically, I'm trying to remember exactly her story. She avenged the murder of her husband by killing a bunch of, they were called the Drevelians. They were a group, they almost sound like they're something from Star Trek, but they were a group of marauders and Viking raiders and Slavic raiders who had settled in the West Ural Basin in the eastern areas of what is now the western borders of Russia, the eastern borders of Ukraine. She conquered them, forced them to convert to Christianity, and avenged her husband's murderers. And then, so she's one of the first early Christian leaders of the Kievan Rus and became a saint in the Russian Orthodox Church because her influence on her son helped him, Vladimir the Great, basically push Christianity onto the Kievan Rus and bring them into being part of the Christian world. So there you go. So she's a saint, she's highly revered, she's a girl boss, she definitely was one of the greatest female rulers of the medieval period. and definitely one you would not know about. Would you like to visit Pakistan if I invite you? Sure, happy to go. Want to travel the world? Yeah. Churchill had a lot of good and a lot of bad. There's no doubt about it. But I like what he did in the second term. Why is Russia's borders so big compared to those surrounding them? So that has to do a lot with this video, and I talk about it in this video and in my Russians Are series and in all my other videos about Russia. The reason Russia is so big, the largest country on earth, the reason it's the massive force in 2 continents, is because the Russian people have operated under a system of basically feeling that they are always going to be invaded and they need space as a buffer zone to keep them safe from their invaders. The fear of this comes from the Mongol invasion in 1240, where the Kievan Rus were destroyed and the Muscovites, the people of Moscow and the other Russian states, were made tributary vassals for 2.5 centuries. At the end of this, the Russian people emerged victorious and independent, but psychologically scarred. And so their national identity has often been about maintaining themselves against possible invaders. When the Poles and the Swedes invaded in the early 17th century and conquered Russia for a small period, this once again revamped their anger towards these people and the need to take more and more land. So most recently, from the Russian perspective, and I've got an entire article on this on my Substack if you want to go check it out, but Vladimir Putin's idea is that the inroads of NATO is an affront to the Russian people. That there were verbal agreements made at the end of the Soviet Union, a quid pro quo, that the Soviet Union would dissolve if the West kept NATO out of Eastern Europe. Now that NATO, an organization created to destroy the Soviet Union and working towards the end of their destruction, was on his doorstep basically in Ukraine, and that there were Russians in Ukraine, it justified him creating a buffer zone between the West and Russia by reconquering Ukraine, which had been part of Russia for many centuries. So the basic idea is fear and anger and worry about invasion. That is a common theme in Russian history, and that's why they've actually become so big that they are overextended in many, many ways. Yeah. Yeah. Will this Sunday be the Great Awakening presentation? I don't know yet. Go vote on my live stream like poll on the channel and tell me what you want me to discuss. There are various topics we can be discussing. There was no Ukraine back then. So the Kievan Rus were originally founded in Kiev in the late 9th century, in the early 10th, late 9th century. Eventually, they were originally from Scandinavia, but they settled amongst the Slavic peoples and established a state there, the Kievan Rus, which is the forefather in many ways of not only Russia, but the Ukrainians as well. They didn't convert to Christianity, only she did. That was later done by her grandson. Yes, I know, Marcus, I just said that. Oh yes, it's right. But that's right, you're right. Sviatoslav, her son, rejected Christianity. He was a pagan, but her grandson, Vladimir the Great, accepted Christianity and impressed Byzantine Christianity or Orthodox Christianity on his subjects at the end of the 10th century. Thank you for correcting me, Marcus. Yes, Sviatoslav, the son of Olga, Princess Olga of Kiev, was a pagan, not a Christian. But she is the reason that area eventually converts to Christianity. She becomes one of the predominant rulers, and her regency is extremely important for not only avenging her husband's death, but spreading Christianity to the nobility. So the seeds were planted there. Why is Russia's border so big? Okay, I answered that already. Can I hear more about communist Romania? So communist Romania was ruled, I'm trying to think, there were other rulers, but the main specific dictator of them for about 25 years was a man named Nicholas Ceausescu, and when the Soviet Union started to dissolve, Ceausescu was thrown out of power and executed by the Romanian people. He was basically ruling Romania as a semi-Stalinistic figure from Bucharest. I don't know much more about them than that, I'm sorry, but there's just a little bit about it. Nicholas Ceausescu, or Nicolae Ceausescu, who was kind of their version of Stalin. Okay, let me see here. Harry and Harris are going back on immigration. Yes, freshly. That's a big reason the Russians want it. It's got resources too. The Russians have never balked at getting more resources by conquering more land. So, yeah. I don't like this new vote for lecture system. People get to vote, they get to decide. I like it. It worked well for the last topic, and then it gives me other topics that I can come back to because people recommend them all the time, Harsh. So I like it. Yes, and please go vote in that poll, and please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Where did the images of Russia and bear wrestling come from? Because Russia has a lot of bears in it, because the Russian people are seen as, are usually represented in cartoons, political cartoons, especially as a bear, it's, yeah, that's where it basically comes from. Let me see here. I mean, we refused to go to Syria, so did the French. The French refused to go to Iraq and Afghanistan. America can't make decisions for the entire line. No, they cannot. Alliance. And if the Soviet Union generally believed that it did, they were just stupid. Very true. I agree with you. Let's see here. So if anyone has a comment or a topic or a question related to history, social studies, or the like, please drop it in the chat. We'll keep it going. We're about halfway through here, celebrating a year of Friendly Neighborhood History live streams where I have answered dozens, hundreds, thousands, I don't know the number exactly, of questions and addressed tons of topics from all of you. So yeah, this is the Friendly Neighborhood History channel where we bring you history in a neighborly, amicable way. Let me see here. Do you have a favorite Russian invention? I love samovars. I have a German derivative of a samovar, and I believe a samovar is actually Persian and the Russians stole it. I can't think of a Russian invention that I really specifically like. Borscht is Ukrainian anyways. Some of the things that Russia claims to have invented were actually taken from some of the Eastern European states that they conquered and controlled for a long time, including the Ukraine. So, yeah. Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. If you're just joining us, this is our Q&A. Ask Me Anything. We have it every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you have a topic you would like to discuss, please drop it in the chat. Would the Vietnam War be justified if it was to defend inside of South Vietnam's borders rather than invading North Vietnam? They didn't really try to invade North Vietnam. I mean, they attacked it on several different occasions, but they didn't really invade it. The goal was to prop up the South Vietnamese government to stand on its own 2 feet against the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese. So it is actually not true. The U.S. attacked North Vietnam under Nixon. It would have been interesting to see what a full-scale invasion of North Vietnam would have done. Maybe it would have been more successful, akin to Korea, if that had happened. Actually, I would go so far as to say that because Russia and the Chinese, the People's Republic of China, were already on the outs by the time you reach the mid-1960s, the Soviet-Sino conflict and all of this stuff, it is very, very possible that the United States may have had even more success against the North Vietnamese because there would have been less aid coming because the other communist powers in Asia were distracted. So I don't know exactly if that's a fair thing to say. Yeah. Harry, we won the Civil War and the American Revolution just fine without your help. Actually, with you guys fighting against it. So there you go. Do you know what the funniest thing with inventions in British history is? If it is a really good invention, it's British. If it's bad, it's a Scottish, English, Welsh, or Irish. That is funny. I like that. My favorite Russian adventure would probably be the periodic table. That's true. Gregor Mendeleev invented that. I like Pavlovian theory. That's interesting stuff to study. The Russians do have a lot of that. If you know what, if I'm going by artistic inventions, I think the works of Tchaikovsky are incredible. He didn't invent the symphony, but he may have very well perfected it. My favorite composer. What is your solution for the United States for Iran? Okay, so go back to my live stream from last Sunday, all of you, and watch it. I talked about the Middle East there, and Harsh, you were there. I think you were there. But basically, here's how you solve it, basically based on the history and everything that I've seen geopolitically so far. Leave it alone. Just leave it alone. If you want to strike and take out their nuclear system, you can, then get the heck out. Because long-term, you can attack Libya like Reagan did against Gaddafi. You can make certain strikes here and there that were successful, or somewhat successful. But long-term, full-scale involvement in that area is a bad idea. Giving Israel tons of weapons to attack is a bad idea. Selling them, not so much. But if Israel is saying right now that it has the capabilities of taking out Iran's nuclear facilities without the United States, it would just need a ground invasion and campaign. Let them duke it out. Israel has its problems, and so certainly does Iran. And there are many Persian and Iranian people who want the government to fall. The Islamic, I cannot believe what I see on the internet sometimes. The lack of nuance and critical thinking in our day, where you criticize American foreign policy, therefore you are supporting you have to default to having sympathy for the Iranian government. Have sympathy for the Iranian people, who a lot of them suffer under that regime and want to get away from it and are repressed whenever they do. Look at the 2008-2009 elections in Iran, for instance. But the truth, which really started the Arab Spring, but the truth of the matter is, you can sit on the sidelines and say, don't go to war. don't get involved this way, don't get involved that way, and not be for one side or the other. So generally speaking, I think that it's a good idea. The U.S. has stuck its big conch in too many issues in the Middle East before. Keeping Iran from getting nuclear weapons, abominable with a country that hates the United States and the West and wants to call them and calls them the Great Satan, especially their leadership. I understand all of that, but at the same time, a long-term war doesn't really work there. Never get involved in a land war in Asia. Technically, the Middle East is Southwestern Asia. There you go. So I know that's not popular. It involves this thing called nuance. It doesn't mean that we can just go and kill a bunch of people and that Madison Avenue can just clock in a lot of productivity. But it does mean that there's not a U.S. war in the Middle East, which we haven't done that well in those wars, speaking as an American. When the Civil War doesn't count because it's the U.S. against the U.S., so the U.S. is going to win. No, that's not true. This Confederacy was a rebellious country that was destroyed by the U.S., and the British almost legitimized that country that was supporting slavery. Until Lincoln really redirected it to being about slavery, the British were on the border of defending it. So why did Sweden and Poland start fighting, and what do you think of the winged hussar? They're really cool. Go check out the winged hussar. It's like the elite cavalry unit of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Basically, border disputes in Poland and Lithuania and along the Baltic, and the weakness of the Russian government during the time of troubles between 1598 to 1610 emboldened the Swedish and Polish to go into Russia and take land from them, the Polish in particular. There was a man named the False Dmitri. He was the Russian Tsar for a year, and he was a Polish national who became a pretender to the throne. He was eventually killed. The Russians insulted the Poles by firing his ashes from a cannon towards the Polish, and this infuriated them. So seeing weakness in the Russians, the Polish and Swedish invaded. So there. What did Graham Bell invent? A working, consistent telephone. It's not like he was the first one, but... And then the company, AT&T is a derivative of a company started by Alexander Graham Bell. Do you know about Peter the Great? A lot about Peter the Great, especially in my long-form video that's dropping at 8 p.m. Eastern, where I rank the czars. One of the greatest Russian czars, a fascinating character, modernized the Russian army, created Russian education, reformed the society, brought it closer to Western principles, modernized it, turned it into a European power, defeated both the Spanish, didn't really defeat the Turkish, but was able to fight them to a stalemate in some of the most important wars in Russia's history at the beginning of the 18th century. Yeah, Harry, I like that. We didn't lose, we gave up. Okay, the U.S. didn't lose Afghanistan, it gave up in Afghanistan. And New Orleans wasn't part of the colonies, by the way, just so you know. Let me see. Was Nixon a better domestic or foreign affairs president? What did he campaign on? Did he carry a big stick against communism? He did, but he spoke softly more often than not, like Teddy Roosevelt would say. And Gaiahan, the truth of the matter is, Richard Nixon was actually a much better foreign policy president, because I count Watergate as a domestic issue. But dividing China and the Soviets was a big issue. Price controls were not a success. The EPA, successful. Stabilized a lot of upheaval in America in the late 60s, stable. Nixon was a good president before Watergate. Yeah. Yes, Harry, the British lost and gave them the Ohio River Valley. The British did not win the American Revolution, just like the Americans did not win the Vietnam War. Actually, the Americans have more of a claim of saying they won in Vietnam than the British do of saying they won the American Revolution. Yeah, Texas, the undoing of the sanctions has not helped. No president who has ever tried to negotiate with the Islamic Republic has gotten far. Did 9/11 really stir the masses into supporting the aughts war on terror? Yes, more or less. It really just pushed the Americans to this idea of we have to get involved in other areas. Democracy works here, it works in Europe. We won the Cold War, we won both world wars we got involved in. Actually, America's won all 3 world wars, technically speaking. So why don't we get involved in another war? Was there ever a time in history where we had no wars going on? I'm gonna think, no. Sometime, you could go to the 1920s in Europe and the Locarno Treaty, or Calabrian, where they outlawed war. And that's literally right before the Third World War, what I call the Third World War, what you might call the Second World War, disco donkey. But then at the same time, at that, you have the nationalists and the communists fighting each other in China. So, it's very hard to not have a period where there's war in a continent, in 6 continents with 7 billion people, now approaching 8 billion, and billions have lived in different areas. So Richard Nixon is not a top 10 president. Go watch my tier ranking on the presidents, Harse, and re-educate yourself. Nixon is not a top 10 president. I know a lot of people on the right lionize Nixon, especially because a lot of people are now, because of Trump and the lawfare they see against him, whatever that is, they think that Nixon is just as much of a persecuted. They think that Trump is persecuted, therefore Nixon's persecuted, so there's a rewriting of history. But Richard Nixon is not a top 10 president. He's actually closer to a bottom 10 president. If he hadn't done Watergate, we could talk. But yes. Yes, other countries helped the Americans win their independence. I know that. Why is there a little panhandle in Afghanistan? I don't know exactly where it is. I don't know exactly how it's there. Is that the Khyber Pass? It might be the Khyber Pass. Can you talk more about price controls under Nixon? Richard Nixon instituted price controls, I think in 1971, to stop a stagnant economy, hoping that would solve the issue of stagflation, which was becoming more and more of a problem in the American economy. After a decade of growth, the 1970s were a regressive economic time period for the American people. And basically, by setting in price controls, Nixon hoped to stop inflation. This didn't stop it, and Gerald Ford had to loosen many of Nixon's restrictions. That's what I got there. And Keegan's, I'm answering any questions. Good to see you, by the way. I'm answering any questions you have related to history or social studies. Funny to say that you win all war, but you don't treat your veteran properly in your own country. Most of them are homeless and have PTSD. So Flora, that's a big assumption there. There's 2 problems with that. One, I never said America wins all wars. America has lost, Pyrrhic victory in Vietnam, really a loss. They've lost Afghanistan, they've lost Iraq, and they lost the War of 1812. I go to the tarmac with other historians about War of 1812 being a loss for the Americans, and Harry would appreciate that because I think the British walloped the Americans in the War of 1812. I don't think there's any other way to see it. And you can believe America won all the wars while also believing the veterans are not treated properly. Veterans have not been treated properly in wars America has lost, not in wars America has won, which just shows a bad attitude amongst Americans about how to win and how to lose. I think you've mentioned it before, but is there any credibility whatsoever to the conspiracy theory that Israel had JFK killed? I keep seeing it on Twitter, and I don't know what Mossad has had its fingers in way too many pies for way too long. I would not be surprised if that was part of it. I'm not saying anything against the state of Israel or the right for them to exist or anything like that. I'm just saying if we can entertain a possible theory that the CIA had Kennedy killed, we can also entertain a possible theory that Mossad was part of that to some extent. The MI6 warned the CIA about something deadly happening before the shooting. What makes this friendly? Hopefully the way we're communicating our ideas in a friendly, neighborly manner. So I picked it because Spider-Man's my favorite hero. I'm wearing red just like him. There you go. Richard Nixon was an extremely smart guy alone, and his presidential actions changed the United States during the time for the better, and election action couldn't invalidate all that he did. It wasn't that he did that. It's that he lied about it, then said the president, then covered it up, then said it was okay to lie about it and cover it up because the president is above the law. That is a problem. So the Republican Party has never recovered fully from the shadow of the Washington Post, and I think it was the Post, exposing Deep Throat and the connection and the cover-up. Because ever since then, Republican presidents have struggled with this ghost of, is a president above the law? Are you the next Richard Nixon? Trump struggles with it constantly. It did damage to the Republican Party that is still being felt 50 years after it was over. So the truth of the matter, and Ford pardoning, is Ford corrupt? And that's how Jimmy Carter gets elected, even though Ford did the right thing to pardon Nixon. And then Reagan and all of his activity. Is he a dictator? Is George W. Bush a dictator for taking us to Iraq? U.S. Republican presidents have gotten a lot of problems dealing with the Fourth Estate and working getting out from under the shadow of Watergate since Nixon. So Nixon is responsible for not just that, but problems for a party that I believe you're probably supporting, Harse. Worst president in U.S. history? It's not Nixon. Nixon is not the worst. Nixon, the revitalization of Nixon's stock over the last few years, MDK, I would say makes him less than the worst, and I'm glad a lot of historians are waking up to that he's not as terrible. He doesn't deserve it that bad. James Buchanan, inactive, tried to undo the Dred Scott decision, tried to force Kansas into accepting slavery when they wanted to be free. basically did nothing to stop the sovereign states from seceding. Weak president, terrible president. Just goes to show that a very inexperienced president like Abraham Lincoln could be one of the best, and a very experienced president like James Buchanan can be one of the worst. In the Cold War, why was Mongolia denied access into the USSR? I don't know if they tried to join it. The Mongolians were the first Asian communist government that rose, I think, in 1921. And I don't know exactly why. I think it might have to do with China and China not wanting to lose influence there. So the U.S. can't win a war on its own, proven, and the only war it was so-called was it also got help from Europeans. I never said what war have the British won on their own? I mean, other than crushing African tribes, in different conquests there. The British don't, most countries, especially in modern history, it's an unfair thing to say that a country won a war 500 years ago on its own when warfare has changed so significantly that it's almost impossible for any country in modern history to win without the help of an ally. So Harry, other than exploiting tribal technological inequalities, when has Britain won a war on its own? And America has won two, and I can think of 3 wars in the 20th century America won on its own. Civil War, War of 1812, and the Spanish-American War. Civil War, not the War of 1812. Civil War, Mexican-American War, Spanish-American War. Actually, the Americans, and they did that without any help from anyone, and without part of their country existing during the Civil War. But yeah, Harry, I do agree that it's very hard for any country in modern period to win on their own, and Britain has won tons of wars on their own. Was John Wilkes Booth famous or not? No, at all, before killing Abraham Lincoln? Not really. Not any, actors were not on high pedestals then. I think that you should discuss the Moors and Ottomans, and if the length of their rule represented a success. If not, which empire was the most successful? I have talked extensively about this, the gunpowder empires, the Safavids. I've talked a lot about it. The Moors were an extremely powerful kingdom. The Umayyads, Almoravids, whatever you want to call the different Islamic states that ran Spain during the Reconquista. There's also the Ottomans are probably the most underrated empire in history. They were expansive. They were strong. They revived the Islamic Caliphate by conquering Mecca and Medina. Europeans are only interested in learning really about their decline, but their rise is pretty impressive. They had Europe shaking in their boots. They conquered the Balkans, destroyed the Byzantines. I mean, what else do you have to say? They were extremely powerful. They were the first empire to really successfully use gunpowder in conquests and campaigns. So about the Korean War, what do you want to know, Ruben? The Battle of Waterloo is, so Napoleon comes back from exile in Elba, rallies his forces, and tries to make a decisive strike against the Allies, which are the Prussians, the Austrians, the Russians, and the British, before they can mobilize a full-scale army so that he can get a foothold on resources and supplies, and a victory will stabilize his power in France. He shows up against Arthur Wellesley, who becomes the Duke of Wellington after this, at Waterloo in what is now Belgium. And the problem is not Wellesley as much as it is Field Marshal Blücher, a 72-year-old Prussian commander whose forces are strong enough to back up the British when during Napoleon's offense and send him packing into defeat. This ends his second chance at an empire and sends him into a permanent exile. I don't know who Stephanie Feldman is. If you want to talk about the way you treat veterans in the U.S., look at it in my country. It's a disgrace. I agree, Harry. It's sad and it's a Western problem, and it's definitely a problem in the United States. No question at all. Deep state, not deep throat humanitarian candidate. Okay then. Was it true Hitler had one testicle, or was that just something people said to make fun of him? There are all sorts of rumors about Hitler just to mock him, just like Napoleon was short. That's just the British lying. The British political cartoon showed Napoleon as short to counter his rising empire. By the way, Harry, how did the British win the Napoleonic Wars without the help of the Russians? Donald Trump thinks he is above the law, therefore he's a bottom 10 president. Proven by the way he treats the courts and the way he basically made ICE his secret police. I like how you just state an opinion and say that's proven. Harry, after Biden, we need some secret. Wow, that's crazy. All right, I'll let you duke it out in the chat. Regardless, the future consequences of the election lie doesn't invalidate what he did. Yeah, everyone's going on about that. Zanzibar, modern-day Tanzania. That's true. The British have won plenty of wars on their own. I'm talking about a non-colonial war. And the Falklands is probably the best you can do. And that is a colonial war. But it was against a developed nation. I'm talking about a war against a developed nation in the last 2.5 centuries. The British won without help from another ally. Was Ernst von Roth into Jewish? No, I've heard about that, Reinhard. I think that might be true. Civil War is not U.S. versus U.S. It's the United States versus rebels who were former Americans who betrayed them and seceded. Remember, never forget, 1865, the United States crushed the rebels. They happened to be former Americans, but that's not a huge issue. That's like the Falkland Islands wanting to gain independence and the British fighting the Argentinians for that and all of that stuff. How many slaves did the Ottomans have? I think you reminded me about 1 million to 1.5 million white people were captured by the Ottoman Empire and the Barbary pirates over the span of a couple of centuries. King James Authorized Version, but there's others. There's the Janissaries, there's slaves from other conflicts. Europeans have been enslaved along the Mediterranean by Arabs and Muslims and vice versa for centuries before even the Europeans began enslaving Africans, I believe. King James Authorized Version from 1611 is God's uncorrupted word, no more, no less. All other versions and translations of the work of the devil. Yes, a Bible version from 400 years ago for a book that was written thousands of years ago and not in English. Mexican-American War, okay, fine, one war. Revolutionary War, again, you still need help from the Europeans. We won the Zanzibar War, we won the Falklands War. I love the double standard. I'm glad you won these wars in a colonial setting. I am saying a war on your own against a developed country in the last 2.5 centuries. And yes, you guys won tons of wars on your own, and I just named 3 that the U.S. won on its own. Let me see here. Why didn't Ottomans take over the whole world? I find that odd, same as Mughals. Why do they allow Hindus into their armies and even treat them well, considering how Hindus disrespect Muslims now? So Keegan, you went to the Evan Almighty school of commenting in the chat. But basically, Hindus were the majority population of the Indian subcontinent, with the Mughals controlled it. So the Mughal emperors very wisely understood that trying to force them to become Muslim would lead to horrible consequences. So giving them more access rights and opportunities kept the peace. The Mughal emperors were extremely good at creating a cosmopolitan society based on tolerance in order to preserve their power in India, which eventually was destroyed by the Maharatha Confederacy and the Europeans. But basically, Keegan, the truth of the matter is that the Mughals were very savvy in that. The Ottomans continued to lose surprising defeats, like at Malta in 1565, when they lost to the Hospitaller Knights, and then, of course, the Battle of Lepanto was a huge blow to them. The rise of Russia actually is a huge deterrent to them. The Russians continually pounding them in the Black Sea over the centuries, and continual fights there from Peter the Great to Catherine the Great destabilized their hold on the Balkans. Basically, the Ottomans, like all empires, overextended themselves, lost, and then started to deal with domestic revolutions, like in Egypt and in Arabia during the Great War, and that kept them from ever being able to conquer the world. So why couldn't they conquer the world? Why didn't the Romans conquer the world? They got stopped by people. The Germanic tribes stopped them at the Teutoburg Forest in 9 AD. Varus, give me back my legions. And likewise, the Hungarians, the Austrians, they were able to push back the Ottomans. Do you think Waterloo was important because if he had won, there would have been another Waterloo, then another war? Yeah, probably. But I think Napoleon would have eventually gained an upper hand. And I've never underestimated Napoleon, even when he's outnumbered, Harry. Why are there so many communist countries in Asia? There are a few ostensibly communist countries, although there's been some adjustment. The main reason is that communism became extraordinarily popular in China because of the unpopularity of a nationalist group when Mao Zedong came to power. Because of this, he was able to use the influence, riches, and popularity of communism in China to export it to Korea, then to export it to Vietnam, and then it took hold in Cambodia, and continual U.S. actions and the Cold War, many of these countries hating the Western colonized them, such as the French and the British, made them more sympathetic to communism, especially in Indochina. So that's why Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam all chose communism. The U.S. tried to stop them, didn't get too far. Cambodia got so bad that the Vietnamese went in and took communism out of there. So basically, it was a series of dominoes. Basically, communism had a lot of support in Asia because the most powerful kingdom area in Asia was communist, with a huge amount of fighting men ready to back it up, like in Korea. Keegan, why didn't empires think of their legacy and long-lasting impact for those future generations to come talking about 1,000 years in the future? The only person who thought about this was Saladin. He did. He was very wise at that, and Julius Caesar and Octavian Caesar were very wise with that. Winston Churchill was very wise with that. Tsar Peter the Great and Catherine the great rulers, are very good at thinking of procreation and of posterity. But the problem is that the Ottoman Empire has a series, especially in the 19th century, of very corrupt, self-indulgent emperors who start the corruption that leads to the demise of the empire, just like the Romans in the 3rd century. First Opium War, I think not. Sure, don't quote me on. Yeah, I don't know if you want to brag about the Opium War, but I'll take that. That's fair. That's against an empire. That's fair. Spain was an empire in decline in the Spanish-American War. I'll accept that, Harry. Ernst von Roth assassinated by his Jewish fling because he wanted Polish Jews to be equal in West Germany. Interesting. Let me see here. One sec. The Falkland Islands wanted to stay British. That's true. I'm sorry, Harry. You are correct. Friendly history, your logic is extremely flawed. If a president does one thing big or super or important, whether good or bad, doesn't ignore everything else they did. Example, Woodrow Wilson, Polk, Oak, or Nixon. So I've got people on the left criticizing me, people who are pro-American criticizing me, people who are pro-British criticizing me, which tells me I'm doing a good job at being as objective as I possibly can, which is what we go for here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. And the only reason I'm getting up and moving is that I'm at 2%. I need to charge. I should have charged before, but oh well. And if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so before you see yourself out. Check out the long-form videos today. Today dropping at 8 p.m. Eastern, and the shorts I have on the channel every day as well. So, let me see. No, my logic is not flawed by saying that about FDR or about those presidents. The truth of the matter is there is something that is legacy defining for every American president. For Lincoln, it was the Civil War. For Kennedy, it was his assassination, unfortunately. But for someone like Nixon, it's got to be Watergate. And for Wilson, it's winning the Second World War, or World War I, whatever you want to call it, the Great War. And we got aid from the Americans, because they were economically. On the topic of the Barbary pirates, why do white people in Hollywood not acknowledge that he was a non-white person? Is this due to Berbers? The Berbers were North Africans. A lot of people just don't know about them, and there's a lot of history people don't know about. They were North Africans. They had a long time association with different Muslim powers and had resisted a lot of them, like the Umayyads, for instance. And so there you go. There's a little bit about them. What do you think that Palantir on Israel, a company who blackmail and bribe your politicians, is Gaverson's? I think it's a terrible idea. The police, the growing interest in the police state following 9/11 for security reasons has not worked. It really hasn't done anything. The Middle East is still just as messed up as it was. Americans do not necessarily feel safer. So Real ID, the Patriot Act, all that stuff seems to be really unpopular with Americans, and there's no reason to continue it, and Palantir is just the next worst part of it. Let me see. America definitely was in France. You should join the war would be a great idea. So, okay. I believe Ottomans did keep white slaves. They had that sort of culture. Yes, almost all empires have had slaves. In fact, the British Empire, especially at its height of its power in the 19th century, is one of the few that did not, because they'd gotten rid of slavery. Oppression, imperialism, and extraction and exploitation of natives, yes. Slavery, no. Soviets killed their own in the World War for retreating. Yes. If you run, you will get killed no matter what. If you go forward and fight, even if you don't have a weapon, you may just survive. Common Soviet tactic. Let me see here. Look at the good Nixon did. It is a contributor to determine if Nixon was a good or bad president. You can look at, I can look at one thing. Lincoln suspended habeas corpus. I don't hate him for that. I don't think it was the right thing to do, but I'm not going to focus on that when I'm talking about Lincoln. Nixon did some good stuff, and I'm one of the first historians who admit that. A lot of people just want to slam the door on his face. I think Nixon will continue to rehabilitate his legacy in the 21st century. A main reason for this can be two sides. One, people see the deep state acting from the conservative perspective and just say, hey, that they tried to take out Trump, they must have tried to take out Nixon too. Or people will say, oh, American politicians don't care about the rule of law anymore. This is more of a leftward position vis-a-vis Donald Trump. So who cares what Nixon did? Trump is worse. So Nixon's going to rehabilitate himself throughout the 21st century, and for good reason, but that doesn't make him a great president. What makes World War II, World War III? The French Indian or 7 Years' War, where you have multiple continents and all of that. I constantly say this, but I'm happy to answer it for you, Kevin. The truth of the matter is there have been 3 world wars. The 7 Years' War in the 1750s was the first one. Keegan, it's perfectly okay. We've got people from all over the world who join us who speak all different languages, and I appreciate their English, sloppy or otherwise, Harry. Which NKVD officer do you personally hold accountable for Katyn massacre? I don't know much about the Katyn massacre, so I can't speak to that, Reinhard, but you might want to enlighten me. Do you think Israel will nuke Iran? If they want to continue to have the U.S. and the West back them, they won't. That would be the stupidest thing they could do, but I don't know at this point. Keegan, it's my perspective that there's 3 world wars. Kevin's just asking me what my perspective is and why I think that. Israel ain't even a country, it's a 51st state. A lot of people are feeling that way right now. Harry, the UK would have lost World War III, yes, which would make Britain the 52nd and Canada the 53rd state, I guess. I mean, you have close ties to allies, and when they are threatened, you protect them. This is part of history. It doesn't necessarily make them part of the United States, though. Is it true that America has a huge embassy in Jerusalem? It's true that they moved the embassy to Jerusalem during the first Trump term, and the Argentinians just moved their embassy because Milei does whatever Trump says, kind of, or did. Harry, the UK would have lost. Okay, you guys are talking in the chat. Appreciate that. If Iran starting BS in the region, they have always had an issue. However, the whole region is now unstable. Will it stabilize again? And are we past the Cold War stage? I don't know. We'll see. It all depends. If Iran is taken out, the Shia will completely decimate. Hezbollah will probably collapse in Lebanon, and it will be a series of Sunnis who will eventually work probably to some sort of Abraham Accordic positioning, with Saudi Arabia and Turkey vying for political control. If Israel wipes Iran out, I really hope they don't. Did UK create USA, or is that another European country? The UK, the British did settle the 13 colonies and create the American colonies, and the American colonies declared independence and fought a war to get full independence from them. What do you think about Tesla, Gaber contradicting Trump and Netanyahu on Iran? Is the blackmail, like Elon Musk said, working? No. Oh, you mean Tulsi Gabbard? She actually said today that she agrees with Trump. It's a nuance issue. I find this absolutely strange that when people have nuanced differences and some sort of disagreement, that means they are either contradicting them, they're a whistleblower, and if they change their mind, or if they harmonize, or they find a way to compromise on their perspective, then they've been bought and paid for. I find that to be absurd. I see it on the internet all the time. No, I don't think that. I think that they were saying different things in a similar way. I think same thing in different ways. I think there is some disagreement about the length and the extent, but Trump asked for this himself. He put Tulsi Gabbard, who's a former Democrat, Robert F. Kennedy, former Democrat, Elon Musk. Musk has basically mended most of his fences with Trump. You've got non-interventionists, you have interventionists, you have conservatives, you have traditional conservatives, you have free market people, you have tariff people, all in the same room. There's going to be disagreement and disharmony sometimes. That's just how it works when you create as diverse an administration as the president has. I think it's a daring move. Lincoln did the same thing, by the way. I'm not saying Trump is like Lincoln at all. But yeah, Sever, I don't think that Tulsi's really gone that far afield from Trump. I think she definitely disagrees with him on some things, but the quote that CNN threw out, I've read it in full, actually shows that she said that Iran is dangerous. She's worried about uranium enrichment. She has said that on multiple occasions, and now she is kind of just going with the narrative. So, what did Eisenhower campaign on? What was political landscape in the U.S. like that in the post-war period? Basically, Truman's low approval ratings, ending the war in Korea, and stabilizing and fighting against communists at home and abroad. Eisenhower gave a tacit approval to the McCarthyist, what was it called? UHAC? Yeah, the American House, the American HUAC, the House Un-American Activities Committee, and he gave a slight approval to that. Later came to regret that, though. Let me see here. Sup, Running Man. Friendly, don't run away from the reality. Judging a president on a single action, whether good or bad, isn't good logic unless you can say it is. I judge him on everything, and I look at how his administration ended. I look at what he is remembered for. I look at why he's remembered that way. And revitalizing Nixon may be an edgy perspective, but I agree with some of it, but I disagree with most of it. Have you seen the thing that Mrs. Kennedy and the Queen were not exactly fond of each other? I've heard about this. It'd be interesting to see how true that was. I'd love to read that story. Let me rephrase my question. In Pirates of the Caribbean movie, they portray Barbossa as a white pirate. I find that odd, but when I look in this due to lack of information on Barbarossa. Okay, so Barbossa is a fictional character based on a Disney movie of a ride at their theme park. Don't read too much into that. Barbarossa was a German emperor who tried to fight in the Crusades, who eventually was the name the Nazis gave to their invasion of Russia during the Third World War, or World War II, if you prefer. So Keegan, Barbossa, most pirates were white in the Caribbean. That the Pirates of the Caribbean, those are white guys. Morgan, Francis Drake could be considered a pirate. Anne Boré, one of the famous female pirates, Captain Kidd, Redbeard, these were white people. Yeah. What are your thoughts on what happened to the Nixon tapes? I don't know exactly what happened to them at the end, but I think that they brought him down. Debt bondage, yes. Debtors' prisons. I like Dickens. Harry, you might like my reading. I did a reading and I did a playlist for Christmas for the holidays of Christmas Carol, and I narrated it. And since it's public domain, I figured why not. So I did some audio recordings of that, and I published them here on the channel. They're like an hour each. Go check them out if you want to be put to sleep. Do that. Steve, I did not know about that. I don't know if that's true or not. Yeah, let me see here, going through the chat. What happened in Congo when King Leopold III got it in the British Conference? I think it was Leopold II. He basically was deeded it as his own colony, and eventually when the Europeans found out how corrupt he actually was, they took it away from him. Ironically, a judge in the famous case said that slavery in Britain was illegal from 1067 because William the Conqueror had passed a royal decree making it illegal for any slave to be in England. Very good. I like that application of logic, and that was ending slavery and embracing serfdom in the feudal system. Let me see here. Did we capture Hawaii? How is a state not connected to a state? So Pizza Burger, part of the way the Americans got Hawaii was through colonization and imperialism, basically feeling that they needed to be just like the European powers of Germany, France, and Great Britain. They invested heavily economically in Hawaii in order to extract sugar, and eventually the sugar plantation owners owned all the land and employed all the labor and were able to overthrow Queen Luiluakalani, who was exceptionally bitter for just reason for that, and basically set up a system where only white farm owners could vote, and they voted to join the United States. That's how Hawaii became part of the USA. I'd like to know your thoughts on Khazar Empire by Chuck Swindoll. This guy has done extensive research on the whole history since 700 AD. Can you please watch both parts and discuss it in the next slide? I might. I've heard that name before. The Khazar Empire was a Ukrainian-based, modern Ukraine empire, Eurasian empire, where one of their kings in the 10th century embraced Judaism, and a lot of people believe that's where Ashkenazi Jews come from. That is absurd, but that is definitely a bedrock. Jews in Eastern Europe do not come from the Khazar Empire. I mean, some of them do, but a lot of them actually went to Eastern Europe in large numbers because of the Western Europeans expelling them, and they had been in Western Europe because of the Roman Empire. Yeah, Kanye brought Trump and Elon back together. I don't know if that's true, Tom Woodall, but yeah. I'll have to take a look and take a long time to watch them, but yeah. Second World War, why was Slovakia a puppet state of Germany instead of annexing it into Germany? I don't know. I think it's just a way to control, I think it was just a way to create puppet states, like what they did with Vichy France, if you're referring to what I call the Third World War. And yeah, we haven't had any trolls. Lighter crowd, but a good discussion today. Yeah, the UK is definitely a base country. I would agree with that. Reynard, do you think it's this racist narrative of some African blacks owning slaves and carrying out the slave trade the same as saying some Jews operated the gas chambers or they would be tortured? It's racist. Except that the Africans that operated in the slave trade did so completely volitionally and were not forced to. The Africans were, if you're talking about the Africans in Africa who were trading with Arabs and Europeans, they were welcome to do it. If you're talking about blacks who owned slaves in the United States, they were freed slaves often who enjoyed doing it. Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that. And I hope you guys think my videos are amazing. And Hars, I know you're arguing about Nixon, but could you please put the social medias in the chat so that we can end our day with everybody being able to access that? And in the next hour, go watch the long form video dropping where I review these guys, the Russian czars. Let me see here. I'm going to try to get through the stuff. We'll maybe finish before 70 minutes. Morocco and Indians don't get credit for their participation in World War II or World War III. Yes, they do. They definitely do not. One of the reasons they called for independence and got it was because they made the moral claim that the Europeans were not superior, they were not civilized, and they had a good point. After the Holocaust and all the other atrocities of the 20th century were mainly caused by Europeans and empires. If you cared to give an honest take of several of Nixon's presidential actions, you wouldn't have had exclusively spoken about Watergate, but more of what he did. Watch my video on Richard Nixon. Go watch my hot takes on Richard Nixon. Go watch my 5 and 15s on Richard Nixon, where I give 5 facts in 15 seconds. I'm very fair to Richard Nixon. Let me see here. The British were barbaric in certain cases. The Romans were barbaric in certain... Yes. The Americans have been barbaric in certain cases, Harry. Like probably 0.1% of involvement was actually African. They had no choice or they would be enslaved. Slav is not derived from slave either, no slave pride. Slav, that's true. Slav comes from a Greek word. Slave comes from a Greek word, but the Slavs were definitely an enslaved people, definitely an oppressed people. Just look at what the Nazis did to them. Enslavement. So, Reinhard, you might want, like my perspective, you might want to watch my video commenting on Konstantin Kizin, the conservative commentator. But basically, I feel that what allowed the Europeans to actually colonize and enslave was not racial bases, although there was some of that to be sure. It was technology that allowed the Europeans to go to Africa and enslave Africans. It was a technology that brought them to the north and southern parts of the Western Hemisphere and colonized those areas and oppressed them. They were oppressing each other and fighting with each other. The Arabs were oppressing each other and fighting with each other. The Africans were oppressing each other and fighting with each other. We don't have as many detailed records of that, but the Europeans do. So the critique of the West comes from the West, is based on the West, and is a misunderstanding of the fact that technology allowed the Europeans to oppress far more people because it allowed them to gain access to far more people through trade and things like that. It doesn't make the oppression okay, but it does give context that if the Chinese had, through the treasure fleets of Zheng He in the 15th century, had gotten to North and South America, they would have been enslaving and oppressing people, probably. So it's not exactly the same. Understand it's technology. And Gayahan, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate having you here. You're making a reference to a different Barbarossa. The one I'm discussing is Barbarossa, who was a Muslim. His given name was Khizr, and he was an Ottoman corsair later. I really don't think he's the inspiration for Barbarossa. I've never heard of this gentleman. I'll have to look him up. Hadrian Barbarossa. I don't think he has anything to do with the movie. Don't judge Nixon based off... Barbosa, I think in the movie is Spanish. Don't judge Nixon based off what happened in today's world. Judge Nixon based upon what he did. Presidents are always judged about what their actions brought about. It's impossible to avoid the future when looking at a president. Jimmy Carter is seen as a great president because he was great after his presidency while being ineffectual during his presidency. It's not fair, but it's the way it is. And Moto, great to see you. And yes, please follow our social media handles. There they are. Was Colonel Sanders a real colonel? I think in like the National Guard or the ROTC. I don't think he ever saw warfare. Why was Albania a communist country if it still had decent religious community? Isn't communism supposed to support not having a religion? Look at Russia, look at the Russian Orthodox Church, and look at what those communists did there. Look at what the Muslims did in reverse to communism in the Iranian Islamic Revolution. And thank you. And Harry is on our Patreon. I really appreciate you, Harry. I really appreciate Kathy. I really appreciate all of you joining us today. Liking and subscribing helps the channel grow. And if you feel like you'd like to join and become a member and get exclusive access, early releases, and extra content, please do so here or on Patreon. If you were drafted, would you fight for foreign countries? No. If the Israelis drafted me, I would not fight for them. If the Iranians drafted me, I would not fight for them. If the U.S. brought back the draft, I mean, I'm getting kind of old, but, I mean, I used to be like, you'll see how fast I can get to Canada. I mean, in the past, this is a benefit of modernity. There are so many privileges in modernity. There's modern privilege, even more so in some ways than white privilege, that allows people to say, I'm going to judge all the moral cases relating to this war and then make a decision. You don't have that in vast ways before Vietnam in the United States and in the West. You have conscientious objectors, you have people who for religious reasons bow out, and you do have people who fight not to participate in war, but they are few and far between. The vast majority of human history is like, hey, we're going to war. For what reason? I don't care. Get your sword and get ready to kill people. And that's how you got drafted. And drafting and conscription, the moral reasons of war are not always taken into account. It's always up to the historians to do that. Why was Russia banned from the Olympics? The same, because they invaded the The U.S. They weren't banned. I don't know. I'm trying to think about which. Are you thinking about? I'm not thinking about. What year are you thinking about? 1980. The Soviets boycotted the Olympics, or the U.S. boycotted the Olympics because the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. 1984. They boycotted the U.S. So yeah. Yes, that's true, Harry. It was the West who created the system of civilization and liberty that encouraged their colonies to gain their freedom and independence. Do you know anything about Shivaji Maharaj or the Maratha clan? I believe that he's the man who created the Maharatha Confederacy, which broke apart from the Mughal Empire and became, I think, allies of the British. Do you think North Macedonia should exist? I don't know why it does exist. I don't know why there's a North and South Macedonia, but I'm not. I don't know a huge amount about that, or Albania for that matter, and why it became communist. Communism in Eastern Europe was a hotbed in the late 19, in the mid 20th century, and probably the Yugoslavians and Tito had something to do with that, and certainly the Soviets did. Yeah, Harry, that's probably a fair thing to say. Why didn't you respond to me specifically with more than Watergate when I asked about you about Nixon? Wouldn't that be a significantly better way to talk in nuance? So you got Watergate, you got the cover up of Watergate, you got the lying about Watergate, you got the president above the law. It's not just Watergate; it's what he did because of Watergate. Then you've got the, and then you've got the price controls. You have things like that. You have the Kent State shooting. You have smaller things that are not big problems, but are problems nonetheless for the Nixon presidency, which is why Ford rolled back his economic programs, by the way. Who started the slave trade? Some claim it was whites and some say it was Arabs, but didn't Egyptians enslave certain groups? To say who started the slave trade globally is almost impossible. It's always existed. Who started trading in other countries? In Africa, most likely the Arabs. Muslims were trading because Muslims cannot enslave other Muslims. The Shia cannot enslave a Sunni, for instance. But they do anyways because they don't consider them to be real Muslims. Do you believe the theory that says the U.S. needs a war every 20 years? It's strange how that works for Western powers to have wars every 20 years to revitalize their economy, build up their military infrastructure, and basically punch anyone who would dare to oppose them. I would say it's a little bit conspiratorial, but I'm not fully against it. Would you do a live on Patreon or I guess a voice chat when there is enough people on there? Yes, I want the Patreon to grow. Please join us on Patreon. Hars, did you put the Patreon and the Substack in? Please do. Yeah, bonus content, early releases, things like that. It's harder for me to upload full-length videos on Patreon, so I do early releases. I do extra series like my First Lady series if you pay for it. So I don't know about Akan Bharat. I can't speak to that motto. Bharat is the ancient Sanskrit name for India, for just India. How much of an impact did the Mongols have in the Middle East in terms of their age of enlightenment, and what do you think the Middle East would have looked like if the Mongols never happened to them? They destroyed the Abbasid Caliphate and created the Ilkhanate. They continued the promulgation of religious pluralism and tolerance. Muslim art flourished in Persia. While they were there, they embraced Islam, common for the Mongols to kind of absorb the culture they're in, A7. You only talk bad about Richard Nixon. To me, that's good, not good. Yes, because I've never talked about him starting the EPA, dividing the Soviets and the Chinese, helping the U.S. win the Cold War, or basically winning the Vietnam War with the Paris Accords. Never talked about that. Yeah, I don't know if Pirates of the Caribbean is based on that. Maybe the name is a derivative, but it's so detached from who Barbarossa actually was, I'm sure. And yes, follow us on Patreon. Ah, yes, King Ashoka. And that's, I'm trying to think, who was king, that was early India, I believe. That was ancient India. That was even before Chandragupta and the Gupta Empire. Wow. That makes sense, Harry, because you have an ancient Macedonia that belongs to the Greeks, tied to Alexander the Great. I've got a video on that if you want to go check it out. And then North Macedon would be their own country. That makes sense why it's like that. Thank you, Harry, for clearing that up. Well, I've reached the end of a chat, and we're about 14 minutes over, but such good discussions and no trolls today. Everybody, well, we had a couple try to slip in there, but I knocked them out before Harry and Harsh showed up. But great chat, great questions and everything. From the history is get that you've spoken about Nixon good before in life, but you have never spoken to me about Richard Nixon in a good light. I don't see why you can't understand that. I'm sorry that you weren't here to see me check that out, but yeah, go back and watch my videos on Richard Nixon. I'm very fair to him. I love this. I get criticized from the left. I get criticized from the right. It's just what you do when you're a historian, because you're probably being objective and telling the truth. So if you enjoyed this, make sure to like and subscribe. Check out the long form video that drops in 45 minutes. My short form videos are always available to all of you. I really appreciate all of the support that you guys give. You guys are the backbone of this channel. Without you, there would be no Friendly Neighborhood History channel. Why can't you tell me? What have I not told you, Hars? What have I not told you? I just said all the good things Nixon did. I mean, I told you all the good things Nixon did. I'm sorry. He's going to, Watergate's a huge point against him. It's a big, big blow to him. The same way that January 6th will always be a blow to Trump, even no matter what good he does. The same way that Monica Lewinsky will always be a blow to Clinton, no matter the good he did. Did Russia always have a rocky relationship with Russia? Think you mean the USA? Not really. In fact, check out one of my videos. Alexander II loved Abraham Lincoln. You haven't told me about the good things Nixon did. When I asked you about him, you only mentioned the bad stuff. I mentioned the good stuff. Are we good now? I hope we're good now. It was ruled by the Mughals for 800 years. Moto knows his Indian history, Keegan. Don't go to school. Don't go into that field. Moto knows what he's talking about. He's referring to ancient India long before Islam even existed, let alone conquered it. And the Mughals are actually, that name is a derivative of the name for Mongol. So, yeah. All right. I will wrap it up here. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us and all the support. Really appreciate it. If you haven't liked and subscribed, do so before you head out. And we will be back tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, for another hour of questions to ask. Very, very fair, Hars. If I'm going through the chat quickly, that's probably one reason why I didn't. I'm just saying that's going to be a big favor against, not a favor against Cap. That's going to be a big vote tick against Nixon for maybe for the rest of the century, is the Watergate scandal. All right. Take care, everyone. I will see you tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern, for the Q&A. Go and vote and figure out what our live stream lecture will be on Sunday. Really appreciate everybody coming out and spending part of their Friday evening with me. Take care. And remember, love history.